Hello there. I have been kinda inactive in terms of watching new animes, so I decided to check out what things have been coming in my anime list. You had your typical stuff like the Freedoms and the Jujutsu Kaisens in the top of the list, but there was something that I was anticipating and I wanted to watch, which was the movies. I quickly discovered that for some reason Madoka Magica was delayed yet again, so I'm kinda sad because of that. But outside of that, there has been only one movie that has come out, which is a name that I think that I cannot say because I would be immediately shadow banned. But in the middle of watching that, I noticed that there was one thing that was technically a movie that wasn't put as such, which is an ONA, an anime exclusive from Netflix apparently, which is the retelling of the story of the Princess Kaguya, called Cosmic Princess Kaguya. The movie immediately surprised me for very simple reasons. It had a very high rating, something that is kinda uncommon for animes that come out of nowhere. Usually the anime that are gonna have such a high level of ranking are usually just either animes that are sequels or extremely highly anticipated remakes of specific mangas. This anime follow a very interesting path that I just saw from yet another anime from Netflix, in which they made the anime first and then very soon after they create both the manga and or the light novel, and that is very interesting. Outside of this case and the case of Prism Rondo, I have never seen such a thing. Usually you will wait for a couple years if the anime is extremely successful, or at least a couple months once you make the retelling in manga format, and maybe years later in light novel. Yet this is completely created in order to make those things all at the same time. And I think that that is very interesting. It was also very interesting because this anime was created by two studios that I have never heard of. Studio Colorido apparently worked in things such as the Star Wars Visions anime, and probably they made one episode or they were co-workers. I don't know why co-workers and not co-producers. I'm very dumb. And the other one, Studio Chromato, is just straight up a completely new studio that this is their first work ever. So this is a very unique story from the get-go. But we should stop caring about that, we care about something more important, and is whether or not this anime movie is good. We do not care about you talking about the studio that created it. And the answer is that this is a surprisingly decent actual anime. Of course, it has a high rating, so it's logical that I think that is good. It's very rare to have an anime with a high rating that is not extremely good. I can only think of one singular example about that happening. Anyways, the anime is actually surprisingly good, and I want to talk a little bit about it. Now, because it came out very recently and I just finished watching it, I will not be able to tell you something that might just be seen if you rewatch it. I watched it once and that's it, and I'm making the video now. Why? Because if not, I'm not gonna get the views. You get what I'm saying? I want to grow, obviously. So yeah, I watched it once, so if I miss some specific details, I'm sorry. I am just a regular human. And before starting with the explanations, I just want to quickly ask you to please leave a like and subscribe. It would help the channel to grow and I would be really grateful. Now, let's keep moving. The story of the Princess Kaguya is one of the more important and iconic of the Japanese mythology. The Taketori Monogatari is the oldest known tale from Japan and tells the story about the Princess Kaguya that came from the moon. But not only that, but it tells the story of how this weird woman became an adult woman in just the span of 3 months from being a baby and being found in a bamboo. As you can see, it's a very weird story. It has some fantastical additions in the story, but it makes sense because it's a mythological tale. Yet they managed to portray it here in a very unique and I think that very cool way. All of the things that I just said are faithfully recreated in the first third or maybe quarter of the movie. Instead of getting in the bamboo, in this case we get that the baby appears all of a sudden in a light post, which is a unique twist to make it in a modern way, and I really appreciate it. And instead of being an old man, the person that all of a sudden discovers this weird creature that is from the space, it's a young girl that is still in high school and that has a lot of issues. Iroha is a girl that is clearly frustrated with life. She's extremely talented, she's extremely intelligent, yet she has to do everything by herself. Because of certain reasons that I'm not gonna mention, she is currently living alone and she is working a part-time job in order to pay for her future tuition and also for all of her food. So basically she is working her ass off for everything. And that girl that is already having a very miserable life all of a sudden gets a creature from the space that it grows into being a woman in a very short span of time, which, you know, that is something very normal. The first third of the movie is Iroha having to live with this weird girl that is technically a regular girl, but it's from space, so it's no normal at all, and she has to deal with her with all her extremely tight budget and her miserable life constantly attacking her in one way or another. And at the start of the movie, Kaguya is completely useless. She only eats the food of the house and starts spending most of the money of Iroha, which, as you can imagine, someone that is trying to save for tuition, that is not something good, and someone that was already miserable, now she has to deal with way more issues. However, this is where the other part of the story comes into play, something that comes out basically in the first scene of the whole movie, is that this is a weird war. In reality, this is not, and it's something that you discover in like the third minute or fourth minute of the movie. However, there is a virtual reality world that feels as real as the regular world, and that is where most things are gonna happen. After all the things that she has done for her, Kaguya wants to give a present to Iroha, and in that game is a very big one, and is that she wants to be collaborating with what is the biggest character in basically the whole war, that is a very important character that comes from also like streamings in real life. At that point is where I realized what this story was gonna be about, and is when I started realizing the good aspects of this story. The first aspect that I want to mention that has nothing to do with the story is based entirely of the animation. Oh my goodness, this is one of the most beautiful animes that I have ever seen, and might be the best. I kinda have to debate with myself whether or not it looks and it's more beautiful than Biodiver Garden, but this one is such a phenomenal visual experience that it makes me question if it's actually better, which should tell you everything, because for most people, myself included, Biodiver Garden is the best pure animation, period. So the fact that there's something that can match it even to a certain extent in terms of how pretty it looks is phenomenal. Now, this is a virtual world and they use more spectacular stuff and the typical things that you would look and say that if they were in real life they would look like drone spectacles. Yet they are perfectly portrayed in such a beautiful way that feels both unique and plausible, yet only occurring in a world like that virtual reality world. And it's not only certain moments in which there are battles or that they are singing and they are making this spectacle. Everything in the movie looks beautiful and every single aspect of it is pretty. The music is amazing, the soundtrack is phenomenal, the character design is really good, and as I'm saying, the animation is just pristine in very different ways, and a lot of them, and every single one of them is good. But then we have also the story as a whole, which keeps following this path of being a very pretty thing, because this is a very cute and very pretty story. It's not a full-on story with a lot of high stakes and everything. The most dangerous thing that happens is kinda truly inconsequential for the most part, outside of some small details. But as I'm saying, it's just not a high stakes story. The worst thing that can happen is that the girl goes back to her regular life, and I'm not gonna say at which moment that happens or if it happens, but it's just something like that. But the story of Iroha and Kaguya is such a cool one in the ups and downs on their relationship, which I personally think that is romantic. It might not be because Japan, but I personally believe that it's a pseudo jury, even if it doesn't fully look like it, but there are certain signs. But the real reason as to why this story catch my eye at some point was not because only of the cute things happening, but rather the love for something that I was not expecting when I come to this show. As I said, I just happened to stumble with this movie and I had no idea what to expect. But I can tell you that I was not expecting this. And it's the fact that this story, in reality, at least in my opinion, is the portrayal of how it would feel to be a Vtuber and all of the things related with it. If you read between the lines, you can see the parallels in all of this. First, the reason to why Kaguya starts being helpful, and I said that she was useless just in the first third of the movie, is because she starts streaming at both an avatar and sometimes at herself, but mostly in this VR war, which makes her a fake persona or a Vtuber. The second thing is that they constantly reference things that would only be possible if this was actually a story between content creators, mostly targeted towards Vtubers. The constant jokes, and maybe not that much of a joke, of people in real life actually wanting to say something cute to the girl. With real life content creators it doesn't happen nearly as often because sadly they are directly attacking real life. But for Vtubers it's more common to get a lot of different comments that are kinda weird. And at times they just straight up reject them, which is what they should do, and other times, if they're not as extreme, they play along with them, which is something that happens in this as well, and they show it as a perfect representation of what I'm mentioning. However, the next part is a small spoiler, so I'm just gonna say for those that haven't watched the movie, that they portray perfectly what is the story of a Vtuber. And now, if you do not want to hear about the spoilers, I am gonna let the spoiler alert right there. I do not know if I'm gonna do something else after that and say something that is not spoiler, so this might be just your last time hearing me. But if you have watched the movie or if you do not care, let's keep moving. And now the last part, and what I think that is the most obvious case of showing that this is in certain way the story of a Vtuber, is the way in which they portray their retirement. For certain reasons, Kaguya is no longer gonna be able to be participating in the VR or what is streaming, and she is now gonna go out of it. Of course, in story they show it in a fantastic way because at the end of the day this is kinda still the story of Kaguya, the Princess Kaguya, but they are also related with very normal things that happen in real life, in which several different people just doesn't have enough of a reason to keep streaming, or they want to stop streaming for one reason or another, or they just simply want to focus in other things in their lives. And I think that is a very good way to represent that. And when you look at the whole story, it's very obvious that at least to a certain extent they intended that to be half of what was happening on screen. They show how she is born as a streamer, how because of her personality is the reason to why people get attached to her, how she starts going in different collaborations with different people, how she starts playing video games both because she likes them and the other reason being because they are trending, something that is very normal in this world, how she collabs not only with individuals but also with groups, like, you know, groups, and how she constantly keeps improving and improving until she gets that famous collaboration, and all of a sudden she becomes even more popular and she has managed to achieve something very big. But the most important one is clearly the graduation. The graduation that is so common for the Vtubers once they are retiring is shown perfectly. They show it like a huge concert, like this grandiose thing that is going on, and she does not disappoint her fans. She goes all in, she goes with the singing, with the dancing, with a very beautiful spectacle. She appears with multiple other people, and all of that feels like a genuine retirement from a regular VTuber in real life, just with a very cute and beautiful way to portray it in a unique story. They also show you throughout the whole movie how she truly is, something that happens behind the screen, because us, the fans of a certain content creator, or in this case a VTuber, we do not know how the people is behind the screen. We can only guess or maybe think about how they are based on the things that other people said and maybe the personality that they show on their streams, but we are never gonna be certain about it. But going back with everything outside of the spoilers, I want to say something that is the last part of it, and is how much I love the ending. Now, I know that saying that how much I love the ending and talking about the ending might sound weird, especially when I say that it's spoiler free, but hear me out. The ending is fantastic, but I'm not gonna talk about the specifics of it, but rather just the general idea. The way in which all of the characters start acting in the last third of the movie feels natural and logical. All of the things that are happening on screen feel completely reasonable and things that should happen. And then, after a long period of waiting, which is like 1 day, yeah, it's not that much waiting. I kinda exaggerate a bit. Such a shame. So yeah, after a short span of time, Iroha goes and discovers something important, which is a very big plot twist for the whole story that totally recontextualizes what happens. Yet, when you think about it, it makes all the sense in the world. How Iroha was there in that video game and why she was there, and when you combine it with Kaguya, oh my god, it is phenomenal. And yeah, I would love to say more inside stuff about the things that happened in the movie. However, I have my personal policy of not saying anything that would spoil too much, for the most part, so I'm gonna leave it at that. But I want to say for one last time that this movie, that was the first movie that I watched in all of 2026, is actually very beautiful, and that might be the most pretty and most beautiful anime movie of the entirety of the year. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope that you all enjoyed it. If you want more content like this, talking about different types of animes, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. It will not only help the channel to grow, but it will help you to make me realize that you also like the reviews of certain specific movies and random things that are coming in any individual season. So, without anything else to explain, once again, I hope that you all enjoyed it, and see you next time. Bye.